The laughter began before Nova understood that her heart had been broken. It rolled through the grand hall of Nightshade Academy in elegant, vicious waves, rising beneath the black crystal chandeliers and circling the vaulted ceiling like a flock of carrion birds. Hundreds of students stood beneath the silver light of the blood moon, dressed in silk, velvet, polished leather, and ceremonial armor. They were the sons and daughters of alpha bloodlines, heirs to ancient territories, wolves raised to believe that strength was proof of worth and weakness was an invitation to cruelty. At the center of them all stood Nova. Her oversized charcoal sweater hung awkwardly over the midnight blue gown she had borrowed from the academy wardrobe. Thick glasses concealed most of her pale, delicate features, while her long golden brown hair had been twisted into a severe knot at the back of her head. She had spent 20 years learning how to make herself smaller, plainer, easier to overlook. Tonight, it had failed. Asher held her wrist high enough for everyone to see. His fingers were wrapped around her like a shackle. He was handsome in the gleaming, effortless way expected of the Sunflare Pack's future alpha. His golden ceremonial jacket fit his athletic body perfectly. His dark blonde hair had been styled with deliberate care, and his bright amber eyes burned with contempt. "You actually believed I would claim you?" he asked. His voice carried across the hall. Nova's breathing stopped. The music had gone silent. Even the masked musicians on the raised balcony were watching. "Asher," she whispered. He tightened his grip until pain shot through her bones. "Look at her," he said to the crowd. "The great scholar of Nightshade Academy. She can translate dead languages. She can calculate ward structures. She can recite every military defeat in the last 500 years. A few students laughed. Asher's mouth curved. "But ask her to survive one combat trial and she collapses before the first bell." The laughter grew louder. Nova felt every sound like a blade pressed beneath her skin. She searched his face for the warmth he had once shown her in private. She remembered the nights he had found her studying alone and called her brilliant. She remembered the secret notes slipped between the pages of her books. She remembered the first electric pull between them, the unmistakable stirring that every shifter was taught to recognize. The mate bond. He had felt it, too. He had told her so. Now, standing before the most powerful students in the academy, Asher looked at her as though she were something unpleasant clinging to his boot. "You said strength came in different forms," Nova murmured. A cruel flicker passed through his eyes. "I said what I needed to say, to keep you useful." The words struck harder than any fist. A hush settled across the hall. Nova's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Behind Asher stood Celestine Vale, the daughter of a wealthy noble family allied with the Sunflare Pack. She wore a fitted crimson gown woven with protective gold thread. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Her black hair fell in perfect waves over one bare shoulder, and her red-painted lips curved with quiet triumph. Celestine rested a hand on Asher's arm. The gesture was intimate, possessive. Nova stared at it. Something inside her cracked. Asher finally released her wrist, only to place his palm against the center of her chest. The heat of the false bond flared between them, agonizing and bright. "I, Asher Thorne, heir of the Sunflare Pack, reject Nova Hale as my fated mate." The hall seemed to tilt. The bond tore. Nova screamed. It was not a loud sound. It barely escaped her throat, but she felt it rip through every nerve in her body. White pain exploded behind her eyes. Her knees struck the marble floor. For one terrible second, she could not breathe. It felt as though invisible claws had entered her chest and dragged her heart out through her ribs. The students watched. No one moved to help her. Asher looked down without pity. "I will not weaken my bloodline for a female who cannot even defend herself." Celestine leaned close enough for Nova to smell roses and expensive perfume. "You should be grateful," she said softly. "Now you can return to the library where you belong." Several students laughed again. Nova placed one trembling hand against the floor, and forced herself upright. Her glasses had slipped down her nose. Tears blurred the black uniforms, jeweled masks, and delighted faces surrounding her. She would not beg him. She would not give them that. Asher offered Celestine his arm. She accepted, and the crowd parted for them as though they were royalty. He did not look back. Nova watched him walk away with the girl he had chosen over her. The severed bond pulsed like an open wound. Someone imitated her cry. Another student called after her, asking whether she needed a book to teach her how to stand. The laughter became unbearable. Nova turned and ran. She pushed through the ring of spectators, nearly tripping over the hem of her gown. The enormous doors of the grand hall opened beneath her hands. Freezing mountain air struck her face as she fled into the academy's eastern corridor. Behind her, the music resumed. That hurt more than the laughter. The ball continued, as though her destruction had been nothing more than entertainment between dances. Nova ran past Gothic windows washed in blood-red moonlight. Stone gargoyles watched from alcoves high above her. Her shoes slapped against the ancient floor, each step sending fresh pain through her chest. She tore off her glasses and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, but the tears would not stop. She had known Asher was ambitious. Everyone knew it. The Sunflare heir had spent his entire life preparing to command armies and inherit territory. Yet Nova had believed the bond would matter more than politics. She had believed the hours they shared in secret meant something. She had believed him when he said he admired her mind. Useful. He had called her useful. A sob escaped her. She reached the central staircase and descended without thinking. The bright corridors of the upper academy gave way to older halls where the torches burned blue instead of gold. The music faded. So did the voices. She kept going. Down one flight, then another. The air grew colder, carrying the scent of stone, dust, iron, and ancient paper. Nova finally stopped before a rusted gate engraved with a warning rune. Restricted archives. Entry forbidden without faculty authorization. Expulsion for unauthorized access. She stared at the words through her tears. Expulsion felt insignificant compared with returning to the ball. Nova pressed her palm against the gate. The warning rune flashed. For one strange moment, pale silver light glimmered beneath her skin. The rune flickered, as though confused, and the lock clicked open. Nova barely noticed. She slipped through and descended a narrow spiral staircase into darkness. The Forbidden Archives rested beneath the oldest foundation of Nightshade Academy. Rumors claimed the underground library contained books written before the first packs were formed. Other stories said it housed cursed weapons, sealed histories, and records of bloodlines the ruling councils had tried to erase. Nova had always wanted to see it. She had imagined entering as a celebrated scholar one day, escorted by professors who respected her work. Instead, she stumbled inside wearing a borrowed gown, an ugly sweater, and the remains of a rejected bond. Rows of towering shelves stretched into the shadows. Iron ladders climbed toward ceilings she could not see. Dust floated through narrow beams of moonlight that slipped through grates near the top of the walls. Chains secured certain books to stone tables. Others whispered behind glass cases, marked with crimson seals. The silence was immense. Nova leaned against a shelf and pressed both hands over her mouth. Her control broke. She slid to the floor as grief poured through her. Her shoulders shook. Tears ran beneath the frames of her glasses and fell onto the dusty stone. She hated every sound she made, but she could not stop. She had not only lost Asher, she had lost the future she had foolishly built around him. A future where her intellect might compensate for her weak wolf. A future where she could stand beside an alpha heir and prove that knowledge had value. A future where someone powerful had chosen her despite everything she lacked. Now she understood. He had never chosen her. A deep voice emerged from the darkness. Crying in a restricted archive is an unusual method of research. Nova froze. Her breath caught. A figure stood between the shelves 20 feet away. She had not heard him approach. Professor Valen stepped into a shaft of silver light. He was enormous. At 6'5", he seemed built for battle rather than lecture halls. His tailored black tactical coat stretched across shoulders broad enough to block the aisle. Beneath it, a fitted shirt outlined a heavily muscular chest and powerful arms. Black combat trousers disappeared into polished boots that made no sound against the stone. His face was devastatingly severe. Sharp cheekbones, a hard jaw shadowed by dark stubble, a straight nose that looked as though it had been broken once and healed without permission. His hair was nearly black, cut short at the sides and slightly longer on top. Then Nova met his eyes. They were abyss-like, so dark they seemed to consume the moonlight. Every student at Nightshade Academy feared Professor Valen. He taught advanced combat and battlefield survival. He had broken the arms of 3 arrogant heirs during demonstrations and sent dozens of students to the medical wing for underestimating him. No one knew where he had trained. No one knew which pack had produced him. Some whispered that he had no wolf. Others claimed his wolf was too dangerous to release. Nova had attended one of his lectures from the back row. He had never looked at her. Now his gaze locked onto hers. The world stopped. A violent current surged through Nova's body. The remnants of her pain vanished beneath something hotter and infinitely more powerful. An invisible thread snapped tight between them, not fragile and uncertain like the bond she had felt with Asher, but ancient, absolute, and alive. Her wolf, silent for most of her life, lifted its head inside her. Mate. The word did not arrive as a thought. It arrived as a command written into her blood. Professor Valen went perfectly still. His pupils expanded. A flash of feral red consumed his eyes. The oppressive force of his alpha presence crashed through the archive. Glass cases rattled. Dust spiraled from the shelves. Somewhere in the darkness, a chained book began to scream. Nova's back struck the shelf. Valen's hands curled into fists at his sides. The muscles in his jaw flexed. His nostrils flared as though he had caught a scent capable of destroying his restraint. For one terrifying second, he looked ready to cross the distance, seize her, and kill anything that tried to take her from him. Then the red vanished. His control descended like an iron gate. The pressure in the room disappeared. Valen's face became cold again, but Nova had seen what lived beneath it. Her pulse raced. He walked toward her. Each silent step made the bond tighten. Heat spread through her chest, sealing over the torn place Asher had left behind. It felt impossible. A rejected wolf was not supposed to form another fated bond, especially not minutes after the first had been severed. Unless the first bond had never been true. Valen stopped in front of her. Nova remained on the floor, suddenly aware of her tear-streaked face and disordered clothes. His gaze moved over her with ruthless precision. He noticed the bruises forming around her wrist. He noticed the red mark on her chest where Asher had rejected her. He noticed everything. Something lethal stirred in his eyes. "Who did that?" he asked. Nova swallowed. "Asher." "Asher who?" "Asher Thorne." Valen's expression did not change, but the nearest stone table cracked down the center. Nova stared. "He rejected me," she whispered. "In front of everyone." Valen looked toward the ceiling, as though he could see through layers of stone to the ballroom above. The red returned at the edges of his eyes. Nova expected comfort. Perhaps not kindness, because Professor Valen was not known for kindness, but some acknowledgement of the bond burning between them. A hand offered to help her stand, a quiet assurance that Asher had been wrong. Instead, Valen reached beneath his coat. Nova tensed. He drew a training dagger. The weapon was long and heavy, forged from dull black steel. Its edge was unsharpened, but the weight alone could break bone. He turned it once in his hand and dropped it at her feet. The dagger struck the floor with a deafening clang. Nova flinched. Valen looked down at her. Tears are useless in a war. Humiliation flared through her grief. "I am not at war." Yes, you are. His voice was quiet, but it carried more authority than Asher's public declaration. You simply failed to notice. Nova wiped her cheeks. You think I wanted this? I think wanting is irrelevant. His coldness hurt, but it also steadied her. There was no laughter in his face. No pity. He was not looking at her as something fragile or pathetic. He was evaluating her. Valen nudged the dagger closer with the toe of his boot. Pick it up! Nova stared at the weapon. I can't use that. I know. Her fingers curled. Then why give it to me? Because you are tired of being weak. The words landed with brutal accuracy. Nova looked away. Valen crouched. Even lowered, he towered over her. The scent of cedar, cold iron, and night air surrounded him. The bond reacted to his nearness, sending heat along her skin. His abyss-like eyes held hers. You have spent years convincing yourself that intelligence excuses helplessness, he said. It does not. Knowledge without the strength to defend it belongs to whoever is powerful enough to take it from you. Nova thought of Asher's hand around her wrist. She thought of the crowd laughing while she knelt. Anger rose beneath the heartbreak. Small at first, then sharper. Valen saw it. His gaze dropped to her mouth before returning to her eyes. The red flickered once more, swiftly suppressed. If you continue as you are, he said, they will treat you like garbage until you begin believing that is what you are. Nova's throat tightened. What am I supposed to do? Stand. She hesitated. Valen did not offer his hand. Nova planted her palm against the floor and pushed herself upright. Her knees shook, but she stood. The top of her head barely reached his shoulder. Now pick up the dagger. She bent and wrapped both hands around the hilt. The weapon was heavier than expected. Her arms trembled as she lifted it. Valen watched without sympathy. Nova nearly dropped it. A faint silver spark moved across her knuckles. This time, Valen noticed. His eyes narrowed. Nova tightened her grip until the weapon steadied. Good, he said. One word. It was the first genuine approval she had received all night. Her chest ached for reasons she did not understand. Valen rose to his full height and stepped back. Darkness gathered around his black coat, making him appear less like a professor and more like a creature the Academy had imprisoned beneath its foundations. Training grounds, he said. Nova struggled to hold the dagger upright. When? At dawn. She stared at him. The ball ends 2 hours before dawn. Then I suggest you do not waste time sleeping. You expect me to train after tonight? I expect nothing from you. His voice became colder. Expectation is reserved for students who have proven they will not quit. The challenge struck through her. Nova lifted her chin. And if I come? Valen's gaze burned into hers with a possessive intensity so fierce that her pulse stumbled. Then I will teach you how to make every person who laughed tonight regret remembering your name. Silence filled the archive. The mate bond blazed between them, forbidden and undeniable. Valen turned away before his control could fracture. He moved into the darkness, his massive form disappearing between the ancient shelves. Nova looked down at the dagger in her trembling hands. Minutes ago, she had entered the forbidden archives believing her life was over. She had wanted somewhere dark enough to hide the remains of her heart. Instead, the darkness had found her. It had looked at her with abyss-like eyes, awakened something sleeping in her blood, and placed a weapon in her hands. Above them, the blood moon ball continued. Asher danced with his wealthy, noble girl. The elite students drank and laughed, certain that Nova Hale would return to her books, lower her eyes, and disappear. They did not know she was standing beneath their feet with a dagger in her hands. They did not know Professor Valen had called her to the training grounds. They did not know that the weakest scholar in Nightshade Academy had finally become angry. Nova tightened her grip on the weapon and followed the path back toward the stairs. Dawn was coming. Dawn arrived without mercy. Nova stood in the hidden courtyard beneath a sky the color of bruised steel, gripping the black training dagger with both hands while freezing rain soaked through her borrowed gown and oversized sweater. Mud swallowed her shoes. Wind tore loose strands of hair from her severe knot and whipped them across her face. Every muscle in her body ached from the rejection, the sleepless night, and the weight of the weapon she had carried from the forbidden archives. Professor Valen waited across from her. He wore a fitted black combat shirt, dark tactical trousers, and heavy boots planted firmly in the mud. Without his long coat, there was no concealing the brutal architecture of his body. His shoulders were massive. His arms looked carved from stone. A thin scar crossed one powerful forearm, disappearing beneath the fabric near his elbow. His abyss-like eyes moved over Nova once. "You are late." Nova glanced toward the iron clock set into the courtyard wall. "It is exactly dawn." "You arrived when the bell began." "That is what dawn means." Valen crossed the courtyard before she registered that he had moved. His palm struck the center of her shoulder. Nova flew backward. She landed in the mud with enough force to empty her lungs. Cold filth soaked through her clothes. The dagger slipped from her hands and vanished beside her. Valen stood over her. "In combat, exactly on time is already too late." Nova dragged in a breath. "You could have explained that." "I just did." He walked away. Rage burned through her humiliation. Nova pushed herself onto trembling knees, retrieved the dagger, and stood. Valen turned. Again. "I did not attack you the first time. That was your first mistake." Nova charged. She knew it was reckless. She knew the dagger was too heavy and her footing was poor. But anger carried her forward faster than judgment. Valen stepped aside. His hand caught her wrist. His leg hooked behind her ankle. The world spun, and Nova struck the ground again. "Your shoulders announced the attack before your feet moved," he said. She spat mud from her mouth. "Again." Nova rose. She lasted 3 seconds. "Your grip is too tight." Again. 5 seconds. "You are watching my hands." Again. 2 seconds. You stopped breathing. Again. 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 By sunrise, her knees were bleeding beneath her gown. Her palms were raw. Her arms shook so violently she could barely lift the dagger. Valen did not soften. Every time she fell, he identified the flaw that had caused it. He corrected the angle of her spine, the placement of her feet, the direction of her gaze, and the rhythm of her breathing. His criticism was relentless, but never vague. He did not call her pathetic. He did not mock her weakness. He treated each failure like a problem with a precise solution. That made quitting impossible. When Nova collapsed for the 20th time, she remained face down in the mud. "Get up," Valen said. "I cannot. Incorrect. My legs are no longer responding." "They are responding. They are simply reporting pain." Nova lifted her head enough to glare at his boots. "Do you enjoy this?" There was a pause. "No." She rolled onto her back. Rain struck her face. Valen looked down at her, expressionless, though the bond between them carried a pulse of restrained fury. "Then why are you doing it?" "Because the next person who puts you on the ground may intend to keep you there." Nova thought of Asher's hand against her chest. She thought of the hall erupting in laughter. She forced herself upright. Valen's gaze sharpened. Again. The training continued every morning before classes, and every night after the academy went quiet. Valen taught her in courtyards hidden behind collapsed cloisters, in abandoned weapon rooms, and beneath the underground arches where old battle wards muffled the sound of impact. He attacked without warning. Sometimes he came at her while she was reading, sometimes while she was climbing stairs. Once, he swept her legs from under her in the middle of translating an ancient military text and demanded that she identify 3 possible escape routes before she hit the floor. Nova began seeing violence everywhere, not because she feared it, but because she learned its structure. Every body revealed intention, A tightened jaw suggested commitment. A lowered shoulder exposed direction. A slight shift of weight announced which leg would move first. Combat was not chaos. It was a language. Nova had always been good with languages. Valen knocked her down hundreds of times. Each time, she rose faster. On the 9th morning, her glasses fell into the mud during a disarming drill. Valen's boot stopped an inch from crushing them. Nova froze. Without the thick lenses, the courtyard blurred around her. Valen bent, picked them up, and studied the heavy frames. You cannot fight in these. I cannot see without them. He lifted 2 fingers. How many? 2. He stepped farther away. How many? Still 2. Another step. 2. His eyes narrowed. Nova realized the truth at the same moment he did. Her vision was not poor. She had begun wearing the glasses at 13 because boys stared at her. The plain frames had become armor. Over time, she had convinced herself she needed them. Valen folded the glasses and placed them on a stone ledge. Leave them. Nova pushed damp hair away from her face. They make me look intelligent. You are intelligent. The blunt certainty in his voice struck deeper than praise. Valen raised his fists. Defend yourself. The next blow came fast. Nova ducked. For the first time, she saw him clearly as he moved. Every sharp plane of his face. Every contraction of muscle beneath his shirt. Every dark, dangerous shift in his eyes when she stepped close. She also saw the instant his control tightened. The bond had become a constant presence between them. It hummed whenever he corrected her stance, intensified when his hands circled her waist to turn her hips, and burned when his chest pressed against her back as he demonstrated a chokehold. Neither of them acknowledged it. Professor Valen remained cold. Nova remained his student. Their bodies were less obedient. By the 2nd week, Nova abandoned the oversized sweaters. They absorbed too much water and restricted her movement. She began training in fitted black trousers and a sleeveless combat shirt borrowed from the academy stores. The first time she entered the courtyard dressed that way, Valen went still. Nova's body had never been weak in the way the academy believed. It had been untrained. Beneath the shapeless clothing was a slender waist, long legs, and graceful curves that now carried the beginnings of hard-earned strength. Her golden brown hair fell loose around her shoulders. Without the glasses obscuring her face, her beauty was impossible to ignore. Valen stared for 1 second too long. Red flashed in his eyes. Nova felt his alpha scent deepen, filling the courtyard with cedar, cold iron, and something darker that made heat unfurl low in her body. Then his expression closed. You left your hair down. It was giving me a headache. An opponent can use it. Nova gathered the strands over one shoulder. Show me! Valen's jaw tightened. He crossed the distance slowly. His rough fingers slid into her hair, near the nape of her neck. He gathered it in one fist, not pulling, but holding firmly enough to demonstrate the danger. Nova's breath caught. He stood behind her, his chest almost touching her back. His mouth was near her ear. If someone catches you here, he said, do not pull away. His voice had become lower. What do I do? Move toward them. Nova stepped backward. Her body met his. The contact lasted only a heartbeat, but the bond erupted. Valen's grip tightened. A growl vibrated deep in his chest. Nova turned her head. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes had gone red. The cold professor disappeared, revealing something feral, possessive, and starving beneath the surface. His gaze dropped to her lips. Nova's pulse thundered. Valen released her as though burned. Tie it back. He walked to the opposite side of the courtyard. The lesson continued without another word. 3 nights later, Nova nearly defeated him. She predicted his feint, slipped beneath his arm, and placed the dull edge of her training dagger against his ribs. Triumph surged through her. Then Valen caught her around the waist, turned, and drove her onto the padded floor. Nova landed hard enough to see sparks. His body followed, pinning her beneath him. One enormous hand controlled both her wrists above her head. His knee pressed between her thighs. Their faces were close enough that she could feel his breath. "You hesitated," he said. "I had the blade against you. And you paused to celebrate. I deserved half a second. Half a second is enough to die." Nova struggled beneath him. Valen's gaze darkened. The movement brought every line of their bodies into sharper contact. His grip remained controlled, but his breathing changed. His alpha scent became overwhelming. Nova stopped moving. The room went silent. His eyes traveled from her face to the pulse beating wildly in her throat. "Professor," she whispered. The title sounded like a warning. Or an invitation. Valen released her instantly and stood. Training ended early. Nova discovered the bruises after midnight. They covered her ribs, shoulder, thighs, and wrists. Dark blooms beneath pale skin. One along her side had turned nearly black. She tried to treat it alone in the Academy medical bay, but twisting far enough to reach it sent a sharp pain through her chest. "Your technique is terrible." Nova spun. Valen stood in the doorway. The medical bay was empty, illuminated by a row of dim blue lamps. He had returned to his black tactical coat, though rain glistened on his dark hair. Nova pulled her shirt down over the bruise. "What are you doing here?" "Making sure you did not fracture a rib. You dismissed me 3 hours ago. You were favoring your left side. You noticed?" His expression suggested the question was absurd. Valen entered and locked the door behind him. The click echoed through the room. Nova sat on the edge of an examination table while he removed a jar of healing salve from a cabinet. He approached without speaking. "Lift your shirt." Her skin heated. "That does not sound appropriate." "Neither does internal bleeding." Nova held his gaze, then slowly raised the fabric enough to expose her bruised side. Valen's face changed. Not visibly enough for anyone else to notice, but Nova had learned to read him. The slight narrowing of his eyes was anger, the rigid line of his mouth was guilt, the pulse in his jaw was restraint. He dipped 2 fingers into the salve. "This will be cold." His rough hand touched her waist. Nova inhaled sharply. The medicine was cold, but his fingers were warm, incredibly gentle, despite their size. He spread the salve across the bruise with slow, precise movements, applying only enough pressure to help it absorb. The hand that had thrown her across courtyards now treated her as though she were something precious. Nova watched his face. "You said pain was only information." "It is. What is this pain telling you? That I used too much force." "You never apologize." "I am not apologizing." His thumb moved over the edge of the bruise. Nova's breath trembled. Valen's gaze lifted to hers. The air changed. His eyes became consuming, fixed on her with a hunger so intense that it felt physical. His scent filled the medical bay, wrapping around her senses. The bond pulled tight, urging her closer. Nova's knees parted slightly as he stood between them. Valen noticed. His hand stopped at her waist. "You should not look at me like that," he said. "How am I looking at you?" "As though you do not understand what I am. You are my professor." "That is not what I meant." The red began to bleed into his eyes. Nova's voice softened. "Then tell me." His thumb pressed lightly into her skin. "I am the reason dangerous creatures fear the dark." The word should have frightened her. Instead, Nova placed her hand over his wrist. "Then why are you afraid of touching me?" Valen's control fractured for 1 second. He leaned closer, one hand braced beside her hip, his face lowering toward hers. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Nova felt the heat of him, the restrained violence in his body, and the desperate pull of a bond neither of them had chosen. His lips stopped a breath from hers. "You are 20, he said roughly. "I know. You are my student. I know. If I begin this, I will not be capable of wanting only part of you." Nova's heartbeat pounded between them. "Then do not begin." Pain flashed through his eyes. She released his wrist. Valen stepped back so abruptly that the metal tray behind him rattled. He closed the jar of salve and placed it beside her. "Rest tomorrow morning." "Is that an order?" "Yes. I will ignore it. Something almost like pride touched his face. Then he left. The public combat simulation took place 2 days later. Every student gathered in the central arena beneath the gaze of the Academy faculty. Asher stood with the elite Sunflare students near the front, Celestine on his arm. His expression shifted when Nova entered. Without her glasses, without the oversized sweater. Silence followed her across the arena. Her hair was tied in a high combat braid. Her fitted black uniform revealed the disciplined strength developing beneath her graceful figure. She carried no ornament, no noble crest, and no visible fear. Asher stared. Celestine's smile tightened. Nova did not look at them again. Her opponent was Cassian Rook, a noble heir known for injuring weaker students during simulations. He entered the ring grinning. I heard Valen has been giving you private lessons. Nova adjusted her stance. I heard you require public ones. Laughter moved through the spectators. Cassian's face hardened. The bell rang. He attacked with a blunted sword aimed directly at her injured ribs. Nova moved before conscious thought. She saw the shift in his shoulder, predicted the angle, calculated the follow-up strike. She ducked, turned, and drove her elbow into his spine. Cassian stumbled, then spun with a snarl. His wolf strength surged. He discarded the simulation rules and brought the sword down toward her skull with lethal force. The crowd screamed. Nova raised one hand. Something ancient awakened inside her. Silver light burst from her palm. It exploded across the arena like a newborn star. Cassian flew backward, struck the stone wall, and collapsed unconscious. The blunted sword shattered in midair. For several seconds, no one spoke. Silver sparks drifted around Nova's body, gathering in her hair and burning beneath her skin like constellations. Her eyes reflected a cold, celestial glow. The Academy stared. Asher's face had gone white. Celestine stepped away from him. Nova looked down at her luminous hand. Across the arena, Valen stood among the professors. His face remained controlled, but his eyes burned feral red. He was not shocked. He was staring at Nova as though a secret prophecy had finally taken human form. The headmaster rose slowly. Starlight magic, he whispered. The word spread through the arena. Impossible, extinct, forbidden. Nova lifted her gaze to Valen. The bond struck between them with enough force to steal her breath. For the first time, Professor Valen bowed his head to a student. Not in submission, in recognition. And as silver light blazed around Nova before the stunned heirs of Nightshade Academy, she understood that the girl who had crawled from the Blood Moon Ball had not survived. Something far more dangerous had taken her place. The silver light faded from Nova's skin, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. Cassian Rook remained unconscious against the arena wall. Fragments of his shattered practice sword lay scattered across the stone, each piece smoking faintly where the starlight had touched it. Healers rushed into the ring, but they moved cautiously around Nova, as though a second explosion might come if they breathed too loudly. Nova stood alone beneath the stunned gaze of Nightshade Academy. For most of her life, she had survived by disappearing. Now disappearance was no longer possible. The silver glow still lingered in her eyes as she looked across the arena at Professor Valen. He had bowed his head only slightly, yet every faculty member beside him had noticed. Confusion spread among them. So did fear. Valen raised his gaze. The bond between them tightened. Nova could feel the restraint in him like chains pulled across a storm. His feral red eyes burned for one brief moment before returning to their abyss-like black. He did not approach her. He did not praise her. He simply turned toward the headmaster. The simulation is over, Valen said. The headmaster seemed to remember himself. Yes, of course. His voice echoed weakly through the arena. Students are dismissed. No one moved. Valen looked at them. The stands emptied. Nova left the arena, surrounded by whispers. Starlight air. Forbidden blood. Midnight witch. Monster. Weapon. The words followed her through the academy, replacing the laughter that had once accompanied her. Students who had pushed past her in corridors now stepped aside. Noble airs lowered their voices when she entered lecture halls. Professors who had ignored her research suddenly requested private meetings. Nova refused every invitation. She trained. Valen increased the brutality of their sessions as though her awakening had changed nothing. He forced her to fight blindfolded in sleet. He made her cross narrow walls while carrying iron weights. He surrounded her with 6 advanced students and ordered them to attack at once. She lost. Then she analyzed. Then she fought again. Within weeks, she learned to move before fear could interfere. Her body hardened. Her reflexes sharpened. The old oversized sweaters vanished completely, replaced by fitted combat uniforms that allowed speed and exposed the elegant strength forming beneath her skin. She no longer hid her hair. She wore it in a long braid that swung behind her like a golden brown blade. Without the thick glasses, her face drew attention wherever she went. Her pale features were delicate, but no longer fragile. Her cheekbones appeared sharper. Her mouth held a new, dangerous confidence. Her gray-blue eyes carried the cold gleam of someone who had discovered that intelligence could become violence when properly aimed. The Academy had always known Nova was beautiful. Now they understood she was lethal. Asher understood it most painfully of all. He watched her from the edge of every training field. At first, he told himself it was suspicion. Starlight magic had not appeared in centuries, and Nova had awakened it after only weeks under Professor Valen's instruction. Something improper had clearly happened. Some forbidden ritual. Some secret transfer of power. That explanation was easier than admitting the truth. Nova had become extraordinary after he rejected her. Each day she grew stronger. Each day more students admired her. Each day the weak scholar he had discarded looked less like a mistake and more like the greatest loss of his life. Asher began remembering details he had once ignored. The way Nova's eyes brightened when she solved a difficult translation. The softness of her mouth when she tried not to smile. The quiet loyalty with which she had supported him before every examination and combat ranking. He had traded that for Celestine's wealth and political alliances. Now Celestine's perfume irritated him. Her laughter sounded empty. Her conversation bored him. When she touched his arm, he thought of Nova beneath the silver light. His regret curdled into jealousy. He saw the way Valen watched her. The professor never stared openly, yet his attention was absolute. He tracked Nova's position in every room. He noticed when she was tired, when she was injured, when someone moved too close behind her. During combat drills, his expression remained cold, but his body reacted to every threat aimed at her. Asher recognized the instinct. Possession. It enraged him. Nova belonged to him. The thought came without logic. He had severed the bond. He had humiliated her publicly. He had chosen another woman. None of that mattered to the wounded pride of an alpha heir. He had rejected the shy, weak scholar. He had never agreed to surrender the warrior she became. One evening, after an advanced strategy lecture, Nova left the Eastern Tower alone. Night had covered the academy in mist, and the corridors were nearly empty. Blue flames burned inside iron sconces, throwing narrow shadows across the stone. Her muscles ached from training, but it was a satisfying pain. Valen had finally allowed her to use twin daggers. She had disarmed 2 senior students and nearly caught him with a reverse strike. Nearly. He had taken her down seconds later, his arm locked around her waist and his breath hot against her ear. "You are improving," he had murmured. The words remained beneath her skin. Nova turned into the western passage. A figure stepped from an alcove. Asher blocked her path. He wore the black and gold uniform of the Sunflare Elite Guard. His hair was perfectly arranged, but shadows darkened the skin beneath his eyes. He looked as though he had not slept properly in days. Nova stopped. "Move." Asher stared at her face. "You do not wear your glasses anymore." I do not need them. You used to say they helped you concentrate. I used to say many things when I cared about your opinion." His jaw tightened. Nova stepped to the side. Asher moved with her. "I need to speak with you. No, you have not heard what I want to say. I have heard enough from you to last several lifetimes." She tried to pass again. His hand struck the wall beside her head. The impact cracked the stone. Nova did not flinch. Asher leaned closer. "You think you are impressive now? I think you are standing in my way. I made you." Nova almost laughed. "You rejected me. That forced you to change." "No, it revealed what you were." His amber eyes flashed. "You would still be hiding behind those ridiculous sweaters if I had not pushed you." "I was hiding because people like you taught me that being noticed was dangerous. You enjoyed my attention. Once." The calm answer wounded him more than anger could have. Asher's alpha pheromones thickened in the corridor. The scent of sun-heated cedar and sharp spice pressed against Nova's senses. It carried a command designed to make weaker wolves lower their heads. The air seemed to contract around him as he released more of his inherited dominance. Months earlier, Nova would have trembled. Now she studied him. His left shoulder was raised. His weight rested too heavily on his forward foot. His breathing was fast, driven by emotion rather than control. If he attacked, he would begin with his right hand and overcommit. Valen had taught her to read danger before it moved. Asher mistook her silence for fear. His mouth curved. "There you are," he whispered. "I knew the real Nova was still inside this performance." The pressure increased. Nova felt her wolf stir, but not in submission. In disgust. Asher lowered his voice. "You can stop pretending." "Pretending what?" "That you do not want me." Nova looked into the face she had once dreamed about. She felt nothing. No longing. No grief. Not even hatred. Only clarity. "I wanted the person you pretended to be." His expression twisted. "The bond chose us. The bond was false. You do not know that. I know what a true bond feels like." The words escaped before she could stop them. Asher went still. His eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" Nova remained silent. Understanding spread across his face, followed by something poisonous. Valen. The name became an accusation. Nova's pulse changed. Asher saw it. His pheromones surged through the corridor with enough force to extinguish one of the blue flames. "You are sleeping with him." "No. You expect me to believe that your magic awakened because he taught you how to hold a knife? My magic is none of your concern." "He gave it to you. You sound frightened." "I am not frightened of a discarded scholar and her professor." "Then move." Asher caught her wrist. The instant his fingers closed around her, Nova reacted. She rotated her arm, stepped toward him, and drove the heel of her palm beneath his elbow. His grip broke. Before he could recover, she twisted his wrist and forced him against the wall. Asher stared at her in shock. Nova held him there with technique rather than strength. "If you touch me again," she said quietly, "I will dislocate your shoulder." His shock became rage. He tore free with a burst of wolf power, turning so violently that Nova had to retreat 2 steps. "You think his training makes you superior to me?" "I think rejecting you was the first intelligent decision you made for my life." Asher's face darkened. "You ungrateful little traitor!" His aura slammed into her. Nova's knees bent under the pressure, but she remained standing. Asher advanced. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire academy. You embarrassed yourself. Students whisper that Valen replaced me. There was nothing worth replacing." Asher snarled. His hand rose toward her face. The temperature dropped. Frost spread across the corridor walls in a single breath. The remaining blue flames froze inside their sconces, transformed into motionless sculptures of ice. Nova's exhalation became a cloud. Asher's raised hand stopped inches from her cheek. A presence entered the passage behind him. Not a man, not a professor, a king without a crown. Valen stepped from the darkness. He wore his long black tactical coat, fastened high across his chest. His massive form filled the corridor, but he carried no weapon. His hands rested calmly at his sides. His abyss-like eyes were fixed on Asher. He did not shout. He did not hurry. He simply released his aura. Power erupted through the corridor. The stone beneath Valen's boots groaned. Ancient wards carved into the walls ignited and shattered one after another, unable to contain the force pouring from him. Darkness seemed to rise behind his shoulders, vast and living, shaped like the outline of an enormous wolf. Nova had felt alpha pressure before. This was not pressure. This was dominion. It carried the weight of battlefields, executions, and armies kneeling beneath a midnight throne. It was older than the Academy's noble hierarchies, wilder than the bloodlines that claimed to rule them. Asher's arm dropped, his face drained of color. Valen took one step forward. Asher's knees struck the stone. The impact echoed through the corridor. He gasped as though an invisible hand had closed around his throat. His palms hit the floor. Every muscle in his body strained, but he could not rise. Valen continued walking. Each measured step increased the pressure. Asher's elbows buckled. Sweat appeared across his forehead despite the freezing air. His wolf whimpered beneath the force, recognizing a predator it could never challenge. Nova stared at Valen. The pieces aligned. The hidden power. The unknown pack. The darkness in the forbidden archives. The way senior faculty avoided questioning him. The instinctive bow he had given her after her magic awakened. No ordinary professor possessed an aura like this. Valen stopped beside Asher. The sunflare air struggled to lift his head. "What are you?" he choked. Valen looked down with terrifying calm. "You are not important enough to receive that answer." Asher tried to speak, but the pressure forced another broken breath from him. Valen stepped over his kneeling body. The gesture was effortless. Devastating. He approached Nova, and the crushing aura withdrew from around her without weakening anywhere else. Warmth returned to her lungs. The bond surged as he inspected her from head to toe. His gaze stopped on the red marks around her wrist. Feral red consumed his eyes. "Did he hurt you?" "No." Nova's voice sounded unsteady. "I handled it." Valen looked at her. Pride moved through the bond. "You did." He unfastened his tactical coat. Beneath it, he wore a fitted black shirt that stretched over his muscular chest. He lifted the heavy coat and draped it around Nova's shoulders with elegant care. The fabric swallowed her. It carried his heat, his scent, and the overwhelming security of his presence. His rough fingers adjusted the collar near her throat. The gesture was intimate enough to make the air between them burn. Nova looked up. "You knew where I was. I always know where you are." The confession was quiet. Absolute. Behind them, Asher forced out a bitter laugh. "Your apprentice?" Valen's hand paused at Nova's collar. Asher lifted his head with visible effort. "Is that what you call her?" Valen turned. The corridor darkened. Asher's mouth twisted with jealousy. "You trained her in private. You gave her power. Now, you dress her in your coat like she belongs to you." Nova felt Valen's control tighten. He walked back toward Asher. His face remained calm, which made him more terrifying. Asher struggled against the invisible weight. "You are a professor," he gasped. "She is a student." Valen stopped directly in front of him. "You publicly rejected her." Asher's eyes flashed. "That does not give you the right to take what is mine." The stone floor cracked beneath his knees. A low growl emerged from Valen's chest. It was not loud, but every window in the passage trembled. "She was never yours." Asher bared his teeth. "The bond chose me first." "No," Valen's voice became colder than the frost. "Your ambition found a vulnerable woman and convinced her that manipulation was destiny." Asher's breathing grew ragged. "You know nothing about us. I know she cried alone because of you." Valen leaned slightly closer. The red in his eyes deepened. I know you placed your hand on her in public while a room full of cowards laughed. I know you left bruises on her wrist. I know she entered the forbidden archives believing your rejection had reduced her to nothing. His calm began to fracture around the edges. And I know that killing you would be easier than continuing this conversation. Asher finally looked afraid. Valen straightened. He did not need to threaten loudly. His power made every word feel inevitable. Listen carefully, Sunflare Heir. Asher's body shook under the pressure. Nova is my apprentice. She stands beneath my protection. She does not require that protection to defeat you, but it exists nevertheless. Valen glanced at Nova. The ferocity in his expression softened for the space of one heartbeat. Then he looked back at Asher. If you touch her again, I will break the hand responsible. Asher swallowed. If you corner her, threaten her, insult her, or use your pathetic pheromones against her, I will break every bone in your body. Valen's eyes became utterly still. And if you ever look at my apprentice again with the intention of claiming what you discarded, I will teach the Sunflare Pack how little an heir is worth once he can no longer stand. Silence followed. Asher's pride fought against his terror. You cannot threaten my pack. A faint smile touched Valen's mouth. It contained no humor. Your pack once sent an army to kill me. Asher froze. Valen lowered his voice. I sent back their weapons. The meaning settled into the corridor. Asher stared at him. The rumors of the exiled Midnight Alpha King were told in whispers throughout the territories. A ruler betrayed by allied nobles. A warrior whose pack had been driven underground but never destroyed. A monster who had defeated a Sunflare Legion alone and vanished before the ruling council could capture him. Asher's expression collapsed. Midnight, he breathed. Valen released the full truth of himself. For one terrible instant, the shadow of a colossal black wolf filled the passage. Red eyes opened above Valen's shoulders. The ancient stones moaned under a power they remembered. Asher flattened against the floor. The heir of the Sunflare Pack could no longer gasp. He could only kneel. Valen turned his back on him. The aura vanished so suddenly that Asher collapsed forward, dragging air into his lungs. Valen walked to Nova and offered his arm. Not as a professor commanding a student, as a king escorting someone worthy of standing beside him. Nova placed her hand against his forearm. His muscles tightened beneath her fingers. Together, they stepped over Asher. Nova looked down once. He remained on his knees, his immaculate uniform pressed against the frost-covered floor. His hair had fallen across his sweating face. The arrogance that had filled the blood moon ball was gone. He looked small. Nova felt no triumph in his suffering. Her triumph came from realizing she no longer needed him to regret losing her. She had already outgrown the girl he rejected. Valen escorted her through the dark corridor, matching his stride to hers. His coat rested heavily around her shoulders, protecting her from the cold he had created. They turned a corner. The academy fell silent behind them. Nova kept her hand on his arm. You are the Midnight Alpha King. I was. You never told me. You never asked. She glanced up at him. You told me you were the reason dangerous creatures feared the dark. I considered that sufficient. Despite everything, Nova smiled. Valen looked at her mouth. The bond flared. His steps slowed. You said I stand beneath your protection, she murmured. You do. I do not want to stand beneath anyone. Valen stopped. He turned toward her, his towering body blocking the corridor. His expression was severe, but his answer came without hesitation. Then stand beside me. Nova's breath caught. His rough fingers brushed the collar of the coat where it rested against her throat. I will protect your back, he said. You will protect mine. The words carried more intimacy than a kiss. Nova stepped closer. And Asher? Valen's eyes flashed red. We'll learn to keep his distance. You could have killed him. Yes. Why didn't you? His gaze settled on her with dark, consuming devotion. Because you had already defeated him. Nova understood. Valen had not come to rescue a helpless student. He had come to honor the warrior she had become. His hand fell from her collar before the forbidden tension could pull them closer. He resumed walking, and Nova followed beside him beneath the Gothic arches. Behind them, Asher remained kneeling in the frozen corridor. Ahead, the Academy's midnight bells began to ring. Nova wore the exiled king's coat. And for the first time, the shadows of Nightshade Academy did not feel like a place to hide. They felt like a kingdom waiting for her. The midnight bells were still echoing when the first barrier screamed. The sound tore across Nightshade Academy, like metal dragged over bone. Every window in the western wing flashed violet. Ancient runes embedded in the fortress walls ignited one after another, their protective light surging so brightly that the mountains vanished behind a white haze. Then the outer barrier cracked. Nova felt it from 3 levels beneath the central tower. She was seated in the advanced examination chamber with 40 other students, a sealed strategy paper open before her, and twin training daggers resting beneath her desk. Final examinations were scheduled to begin at midnight, following an old academy tradition that claimed a wolf's true nature revealed itself best beneath darkness. The instructors had barely distributed the first test when the stone floor shuddered. Ink trembled inside glass wells. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling. Professor Marrow stopped speaking. A second impact struck the fortress. This time, the windows exploded inward. Students screamed and ducked as enchanted glass dissolved into harmless blue sparks before touching the floor. Freezing wind rushed through the chamber, carrying a scent that made Nova's wolf recoil. Rotten magic. Ancient hunger. The same darkness she had sensed within certain chained books in the Forbidden Archives, only stronger and alive. Professor Marrow ran to the broken window. Far below, the Academy's outer walls glowed beneath the blood moon. The main protective dome flickered over the fortress like a dying star. Black shapes hurled themselves against it from every direction. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands. They moved through the mountain mist on 4 limbs, their bodies formed from shifting smoke and hardened shadow. Some were the size of wolves. Others towered above the trees, with elongated arms and white, empty eyes. Each time they struck the barrier, dark fractures spread across its surface. "What are they?" a student whispered. Nova stood. "Shadow beasts." The room turned toward her. She had read about them in restricted military histories. Creatures created when corrupted magic gathered around sites of mass fear. They possessed no blood, no true bodies, and no minds beyond the need to extinguish living energy. Professor Marrow looked at her sharply. They have not crossed into these territories for 3 centuries. Another impact shook the chamber. A section of the barrier above the eastern battlements collapsed. The shadow beasts poured through. Alarm horns erupted across the academy. Red light flooded the corridors as emergency runes activated. Faculty voices thundered from enchanted speakers, ordering students to report to defensive stations. The examination chamber exploded into movement. Elite heirs shoved past younger scholars. Students drew ceremonial weapons with shaking hands. Several noble girls began crying. Others transformed partially, claws extending as panic overtook discipline. Nova closed her examination book. Across the academy, she felt Valen. The mate bond had become sharper since the corridor confrontation, not weaker. It pulsed beneath her heart like a second rhythm. Now it carried no words, only a vast and sudden awareness. Danger. Command. Protection. Valen was already moving. Nova secured her daggers and followed the evacuation route toward the central courtyard. Nightshade Academy had trained its students for war since its founding. Every corridor contained hidden weapon cabinets. Every tower could become a defensive position. Every student had memorized emergency formations. The plans lasted less than 3 minutes. The first shadow beast broke through the eastern doors before the elite guard completed its line. It struck the barrier shields with enough force to send 6 students sliding across the marble. The creature's body expanded upon impact, becoming a wave of darkness that climbed the walls and extinguished every torch. A student shouted. Someone abandoned formation. Then everyone moved at once. The defense line collapsed. Sunflare heirs who had boasted about battlefield glory ran toward the inner staircase. Senior students pushed younger ones aside. Spells were launched without aim, striking pillars and protective wards. One blast shattered a statue above the entrance, showering the hall with fragments. The shadow beast reformed. 2 more entered behind it. Nova climbed onto a fallen stone bench. "Stop casting at the center mass," she shouted. "Their cores are behind the eyes." No one listened. A 4th creature bounded through the doorway. Nova threw a dagger. The blade passed through its smoky shoulder, exactly as expected, then struck the pale point between its eyes. Silver light flashed along the metal. The beast collapsed into vapor. The students nearest her stared. Nova retrieved her 2nd dagger. "Aim for the white eyes," she ordered. "Cross your attacks. Force them into narrow spaces." Asher stood near the front of the broken defense line, holding a gold-edged sword. His face was pale. Celestine clung to his arm, preventing him from taking a stable stance. Another shadow beast charged. Asher raised his weapon too early. The creature changed direction. Nova saw the attack before it landed. She leapt from the bench, hit the floor in a roll, and drove her dagger upward through the white core beneath the beast's jaw. Starlight burst through the blade. The creature dissolved above her. Asher stumbled backward. Nova rose. "Move Celestine to the western stairwell." He stared at her. "You are giving me orders?" A thunderous crash sounded from outside. The remaining barrier shattered. Darkness poured across the courtyard. Nova looked through the broken doors and saw the full siege. Shadow beasts climbed the outer walls like living smoke. Winged forms circled the towers. Massive creatures struck the gates, while smaller ones streamed through fractures in the stone. Faculty members fought along the battlements, but their spells were weakening. The beasts were feeding on fear. Every scream made them darker. Every collapse strengthened them. Asher saw the horde and lost what remained of his confidence. "We cannot hold this." "We do not need to hold the entire fortress," Nova said. "We need to secure the students and protect the ward anchors. The barriers are gone. The outer barrier is gone. The foundation anchors are intact. How do you know?" "I studied them." Asher looked toward the courtyard again. A group of Sunflare students attempted a spear formation. A winged beast descended among them, scattering the line without touching a single fighter. They fled immediately. Asher's hand tightened around his sword. "My father's forces will come. The mountains are sealed by the storm. The ruling council will send help. They will arrive after the academy falls." His eyes flashed with offended fear. "You think you know everything?" "No, I know enough to understand that waiting will kill us." The doors behind them burst inward. A massive shadow beast entered the hall. It stood twice the height of a wolf, its long forelimbs ending in hooked shapes made from condensed darkness. White fire burned in its hollow face. Students pressed themselves against the walls. Nova raised her dagger. The creature lunged. A black figure dropped from the upper balcony. Valen landed between Nova and the beast. The impact cracked the marble. He wore no tactical coat. His black combat uniform was torn at one shoulder, and darkness moved around him in slow, violent currents. His eyes glowed pure red. The shadow beast struck. Valen caught it by the throat. For one impossible second, man and creature remained locked together. Then Valen hurled it through the eastern doors. The beast crossed the courtyard and smashed into the outer wall, dissolving into black mist. Silence seized the hall. Valen turned. His gaze found Nova immediately. He took in her uninjured stance, the silver light along her dagger, and the bodies of the vanished creatures still steaming around her. "You were ordered to evacuate." The evacuation route collapsed. Then choose another. I am helping. You are surrounded. So are you. A muscle moved in his jaw. The bond between them burned with his fury, but beneath it lay something rawer. Fear. Not for the Academy. For her. Valen stepped closer. Nova. No. The single word stopped him. She had never refused him so directly. Another impact struck the courtyard. The roof groaned. Shadow beasts flooded across the battlements, forcing instructors back toward the central towers. Nova held his gaze. You taught me not to hide. I taught you to survive. You taught me that knowledge belongs to whoever has the strength to defend it. His eyes darkened. I will defend you. And who defends everyone while you do? The question struck its target. Valen looked toward the students, packed inside the hall. He saw the younger scholars trembling behind overturned tables. He saw injured instructors trying to maintain protective wards. He saw Asher and the elite heirs standing in broken formation, their prestigious bloodlines meaningless beneath real pressure. A roar echoed from the courtyard. Not animal, not entirely magical. The largest shadow beast yet climbed over the outer wall. It rose above the Academy gates, a towering mass of darkness with 6 white eyes burning across its face. Each step extinguished the protective runes beneath its feet. Valen's aura changed. The cold professor vanished. The hidden king emerged. Power rolled outward from him, deeper and heavier than it had been in the corridor with Asher. The shadows along the walls bent toward him. The stone beneath his boots turned black with frost. Every wolf in the hall lowered its head. Even the shadow beasts hesitated. Valen looked at Nova. Reach the western tower. She understood immediately. It was the highest point in the Academy. The primary celestial ward anchor rested beneath its observatory floor. You know what I am trying to do? I know your magic answers the sky. What will you do? His red eyes shifted toward the courtyard. What kings are made for? Valen walked through the broken doors. The giant shadow beast struck downward with one enormous limb. Valen did not dodge. He transformed. Darkness exploded from his body. His human shape expanded with terrifying speed, bones and muscle shifting beneath a storm of black energy. The marble floor shattered around him. His arms became massive forelegs. His shoulders rose higher than a mounted warrior. Midnight black fur flowed over a body built with the brutal proportions of an ancient war beast. When the transformation ended, a colossal wolf stood in the courtyard. He was larger than any Alpha Nova had ever seen. His fur absorbed the moonlight instead of reflecting it. Silver scars crossed his flanks like old lightning. His claws cut into the stone. His eyes burned red beneath a crown-shaped ridge of black fur. The Midnight Alpha King raised his head. His roar shook the entire mountain. The shadow beasts recoiled. The students did not. They stared. Valen charged. He hit the giant creature with enough force to lift it from the ground. Dark energy burst outward in a circular shock wave, clearing the courtyard of smaller beasts. He moved with brutal efficiency, never wasting motion. One strike of his forepaw shattered a shadow core. One snap of his jaws dispersed another creature into smoke. When winged beasts descended, he launched himself from the walls and dragged them from the air with pure kinetic force. He was not fighting like a professor. He was reclaiming a battlefield. Nova turned toward the western staircase. Asher, he looked at her. Gather the elite students. Hold this hall. His pride returned just enough to make him hesitate. You do not command me. Nova stepped close. Silver light flashed across her eyes. Then keep panicking and become food for a shadow. Celestine released his arm. Asher looked from Nova to the midnight wolf, tearing through the courtyard. Something inside him finally yielded. What do you need? 3 shield lines. Rotate every 30 seconds. Keep the frightened students silent. The creatures feed on panic. Asher swallowed. Then he turned toward the Sunflare heirs. You heard her. Form on me. Nova ran. The western staircase spiraled upward through the oldest section of the Academy. Emergency lights flashed red across narrow stone steps. The tower groaned beneath repeated impacts as shadow beasts struck from outside. Nova climbed faster. A winged creature broke through a window above her. She ducked beneath its first strike, planted one foot against the wall, and launched herself upward. Her dagger pierced the white core behind its eye. Silver energy flashed. The beast vanished. Nova landed and kept running. The bond connected her to Valen through every level of stone. She felt his attacks as pulses of darkness beneath her ribs. He was moving through the courtyard, clearing paths for trapped students, protecting retreating faculty, forcing the horde away from the central halls. But more creatures were coming. The shadow storm beyond the mountains had become a living sea. Each destroyed beast was replaced by 3 more. The breach was not random. Something had opened a gateway in the sky. Nova reached the upper observatory. The circular chamber had no roof. Above it stretched the blood moon, surrounded by clouds moving in opposite directions. At the center of the floor lay the celestial anchor, an ancient silver seal shaped like overlapping stars. The seal was dark. Nova dropped to her knees beside it. She placed both palms against the metal. Nothing happened. Below, Valen roared. Pain moved through the bond. Nova saw the battlefield through him for one flashing instant. A dozen beasts had surrounded his wolf form. The giant 6-eyed creature was reforming near the gates. Students were trapped along the northern wall. Nova pushed harder. "Wake up!" The seal remained cold. She remembered the first burst in the arena. It had not come from study or control. It had come when Cassion's sword descended toward her skull. Fear had broken the first lock. But fear was not enough now. Nova closed her eyes. She thought of the girl who had knelt in the grand hall while everyone laughed. She thought of every year spent hiding her face, her body, her intelligence, and her power to make weaker people comfortable. She thought of Valen placing the dagger at her feet. "Stunt," the word rose through her. Not his voice this time. Her own. Nova opened her eyes. Silver light flooded her vision. The ancient seal within her shattered. Power erupted from her chest. It was not heat. It was the cold brilliance of distant stars, ancient and endless. It surged through her veins, burned away exhaustion, and poured from her hands into the celestial anchor. The observatory exploded with light. Silver lines raced through the floor, down the tower, and across every foundation ward in the academy. Broken runes reignited. Cracked statues opened luminous eyes. The entire fortress became a constellation carved into stone. Nova rose into the air. Her braid lifted behind her. Silver fire wrapped around her body, forming flowing armor of light over her black combat uniform. Her eyes blazed like twin moons. Above the tower, a vast magical array began to form. First came a single circle. Then hundreds of intersecting lines. Stars appeared at each point, connected by luminous paths that stretched across the night sky. The array expanded beyond the academy, beyond the mountain, until it covered the entire battlefield like a second silver heavens. Every shadow beast stopped. Nova could see them all. She could see their cores. She could see the currents of corrupted energy connecting them to the gateway above the clouds. And she could see Valen. The midnight wolf stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by darkness. He lifted his blood-red gaze toward the tower. Their bond opened completely. No words were needed. Nova raised one hand. The magical array moved with her. Silver beams descended from the sky. Each beam struck a shadow core with perfect precision. The battlefield erupted in silent light. Beasts vanished across the walls. Winged creatures dissolved before reaching the towers. The massive 6-eyed monster raised its arms, trying to shield itself. Valen charged. Nova shifted the array. Silver energy wrapped around his midnight black body, not weakening his darkness, but sharpening it. Starlight formed brilliant armor along his shoulders and claws. Each movement left a trail of luminous constellations behind him. He leapt. Nova focused every line of the array on the giant beast. The creature froze beneath the pressure of the stars. Valen struck its center. Darkness and light collided. A silver-black shockwave expanded across the courtyard, passed through the academy walls, and swept over the mountain without harming a single student. Every shadow beast it touched disappeared. The giant creature broke apart into harmless mist. Valen landed on the battlements. Nova turned her gaze upward. The gateway remained. A rotating wound in the clouds poured darkness into the world. It resisted the starlight, widening as though something on the other side had realized she was there. Nova spread both arms. The array expanded. Pain tore through her body. The awakened magic was too large for human flesh. Silver cracks appeared along her hands and forearms, glowing beneath her skin. Through the bond, Valen felt it. His roar reached the tower. Stop. The command struck her mind. Nova refused. Not yet. She pulled power from every celestial line above her. The stars beyond the clouds answered. Light gathered around the blood moon, turning its red surface silver. The gateway twisted. Shadow tendrils reached toward her. Valen raced across the fortress rooftops. He moved from tower to tower in impossible leaps, his wolf form wrapped in Nova's light. Each landing shook tiles loose. Each bound carried him closer to the observatory. The tendrils descended. Nova brought her hands together. The magical array collapsed inward. Every silver line converged upon the gateway. The sky became white. A soundless explosion tore through the clouds. The shadow portal folded in on itself, compressed by celestial force until it became a single black point. Then Nova closed her fist. The point vanished. Silence fell over Nightshade Academy. The remaining clouds drifted apart. Stars appeared above the mountain. Nova's power released her. The silver armor dissolved. The array faded. Her body dropped toward the observatory floor. She never reached it. A massive midnight black wolf leapt through the open tower and caught her across his back. Nova's fingers sank into his fur. Valen lowered himself carefully until she slid against his side. Darkness rippled over him as he shifted back into human form. A moment later, his arms were around her. He was kneeling on the observatory floor, holding her against his bare chest. His breathing was rough. His black hair was damp with mist, and silver light still traced the scars along his shoulders. His hands moved over her face, her neck, her arms, searching for injuries. You broke the seal completely. Nova could barely keep her eyes open. It seemed efficient. You could have burned yourself alive. So could you. I heal. So do I. His abyss-like eyes flashed red. That remains unproven. Nova looked past him. Below the tower, the academy courtyard was visible through the broken walls. Students emerged from hiding. Instructors lowered their weapons. The elite defense line stood intact around the central hall, protected by the last remnants of her silver wards. Asher looked up from the courtyard. He saw Nova in Valen's arms. He saw the exiled king holding her as though the entire fortress mattered less than the rhythm of her breathing. This time, jealousy did not fill his face. Only awe. Valen followed Nova's gaze. The students below began kneeling. Not only the midnight descendants hidden among the academy ranks. Sunflare heirs knelt. Noble daughters knelt. Professors lowered their heads. Even the headmaster bowed beneath the tower. They had witnessed a true Alpha King defend them without hesitation. They had witnessed a forgotten power awaken above them. And they had watched darkness and starlight move as one. Valen looked back at Nova. You refused to hide. You would have found me if I had. Yes. His answer was immediate. Nova touched the side of his face. You protected them all. I protected what you refused to abandon. The bond pulsed between them, no longer a spark or a chain, but a living bridge of darkness and light. Valen lowered his forehead to hers. His cold facade was gone. What remained was exhaustion, restrained devotion, and fear that arrived only after the danger had passed. You felt me get hurt, he said. Yes, that is why you forced the awakening. It was one reason. What was the other? Nova looked over the academy. Broken towers stood beneath a clearing sky. Silver runes glowed across the walls. Students gathered in the courtyard, alive because they had fought together after their formations failed. I was tired of waiting for someone else to save my world. Valen's rough hand closed around hers. Pride filled his gaze. Below them, the midnight wolf's roar seemed to linger in the stone, while silver starlight continued to shine along every restored ward. The academy had survived, but the fortress was no longer the same. Neither was Nova. The ancient seal was gone. Her power was awake. The entire territory would soon learn that starlight magic had returned, and that its bearer stood bound to the exiled Midnight Alpha King. Enemies would come, councils would panic, old wars would reopen. Nova felt no fear. She had spent her life believing darkness was where frightened people disappeared. Now she understood that darkness could also be a throne, a shield, and the place where stars burned brightest. Valen rose with Nova, held securely against his chest. Together, they faced the kneeling academy beneath the silver sky. The professor's disguise had fallen. The scholar's weakness had burned away. And before the first light of dawn touched the mountains, every wolf in Nightshade Academy knew they had not merely survived a siege. They had witnessed the awakening of a king and his queen. The first dawn after the siege rose over Nightshade Academy in silver silence. Broken towers cut dark shapes against the pale sky. Cracked battlements still carried the faint glow of Nova's restored wards, while the courtyards below were covered with shattered weapons, abandoned shields, and the dissolving remnants of shadow magic. No bodies lay among the stones. The healers had worked through the night, carrying the injured into the medical wing and sealing every wound that could be sealed. The academy had survived. By sunrise, every territory knew why. Messengers crossed the mountains on enchanted steeds. Communication crystals blazed inside council chambers. Recordings of the silver magical array appeared before noble families who had spent centuries insisting that starlight magic was extinct. They saw Nova suspended above the western tower, her eyes burning like moons. They saw the enormous midnight black wolf charging through the horde beneath her. They saw darkness and light moving together with perfect, terrifying precision. The story spread faster than fear. The forgotten scholar had awakened. The exiled king had returned. Nightshade Academy had been saved by the two people its ruling elites had underestimated most. Nova recovered in the highest room of the medical tower. She awoke to morning light spilling over white sheets, and Valen sitting beside the bed. He had returned to human form, but not to his professor's uniform. He wore a black shirt, with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Silver scars crossed his forearms. His head rested against the stone wall, his abyss-like eyes closed, though one enormous hand remained wrapped around hers. Nova studied him in silence. The cold combat professor looked almost peaceful in sleep. Almost. Even unconscious, he occupied the room like a predator. His shoulders were tense. His thumb rested over the pulse in her wrist as though he had refused to trust the healer's assurances that she would live. Nova moved her fingers. His eyes opened instantly. Red flashed through them before he recognized her. "You are awake. You sound disappointed." Valen leaned forward. His hand rose to her face, rough fingers brushing her cheek with impossible gentleness. "You stopped breathing for 11 seconds. I was unconscious. You stopped." Nova watched the fear move behind his controlled expression. "I came back. You should never have needed to. The gateway would have destroyed the academy. I would have found another way. There was no other way. There is always another way when the alternative is losing you." The words hung between them. Nova's heartbeat changed beneath his thumb. Valen seemed to realize what he had admitted. His jaw tightened, but he did not look away. "How long have you been sitting there?" she asked. "Since you collapsed." "That was yesterday." "Yes. You did not leave?" "No." Nova squeezed his hand. The bond warmed. Valen looked down at their joined fingers, as though the simple contact carried more danger than the siege. A knock sounded. The headmaster entered with 3 council representatives behind him. Valen's expression closed immediately. His hand remained around Nova's. The oldest representative bowed. "Lady Nova Hale." Nova frowned. "No one has ever called me that." "Titles have become complicated." Valen's gaze sharpened. "Speak clearly." The representatives exchanged nervous looks. The oldest man lifted a sealed document. "The Academy Council has completed its preliminary inquiry into the defensive collapse." Nova already knew what would come. She had watched the elite lines break. She had seen trained heirs abandon younger students. She had witnessed Asher hesitate while others fought. "The Sunflare Division failed to hold its assigned gate," the representative continued. "Several senior students deserted their posts. Their actions endangered the entire Eastern Wing." "And Asher?" Nova asked. The representative lowered his eyes. "As acting commander, he bears responsibility." Valen's thumb moved once across Nova's wrist. "What punishment?" he asked. "Removal of all Academy honors. Expulsion from the elite guard. Revocation of his command ranking." "That is not exile," Valen said. The room became colder. The representative swallowed. "The Sunflare Pack has refused to receive him." Nova looked toward the window. Asher had spent his life believing his bloodline made him untouchable. Now that same bloodline had abandoned him to protect its reputation. "He will be removed from Nightshade territory before sunset," the man said. "No noble academy will accept his transfer. His military recommendations have been withdrawn." Nova felt no joy, only a strange, distant sadness for the person he had chosen to become. "Has he been told?" she asked. "He is waiting in the lower courtyard." Valen watched her carefully. "You do not need to see him." "I know." Nova released his hand and rose from the bed. Her legs trembled only once. "I still will." The lower courtyard was crowded. Students filled the balconies and staircases. Whispers moved through the gathering as Asher stood beneath the academy gates wearing a plain gray traveling coat. His ceremonial gold insignia was gone. So were the medals he had displayed at every formal event. A single bag rested at his feet. Celestin was nowhere near him. Nova entered with Valen beside her. The students parted immediately. Asher looked up. His face had changed. The confidence that once seemed permanent had collapsed beneath exhaustion and humiliation. His eyes moved over Nova's fitted black uniform, the silver glow still lingering beneath her skin, and the Alpha King at her shoulder. Laughter began somewhere above. It spread through the courtyard. The same cruel sound that had surrounded Nova at the Blood Moon Ball now turned against Asher. He flinched. Nova raised one hand. The laughter stopped. Asher stared at her. "You came to enjoy this?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "To make sure I felt nothing." His mouth tightened. "And?" Nova searched herself. There was no wound left for him to touch. "I feel sorry for you." The pity broke him more thoroughly than hatred. Asher looked at Valen. "You won." Valen's expression remained cold. "This was never a contest. You took everything from me. No, you discarded everything worth having." Asher's eyes returned to Nova. "I made a mistake. You made a decision. I was afraid. So was everyone during the siege. I could change." Nova stepped closer. For one heartbeat, she saw the boy who had once slipped kind notes into her books. Then she saw the man who had used her devotion as a tool and her weakness as public entertainment. "You may," she said, "but not for me." The gates opened. Beyond them waited a narrow mountain road and an escort with no banners. Asher looked around at the students who had once admired him. Several turned away. Others whispered openly. The star of Nightshade Academy picked up his bag. Before leaving, he looked at Nova one final time. "You really do not love me anymore." "No." The word carried no cruelty. That made it absolute. Asher walked through the gates. They closed behind him. Nova did not watch the road. She turned toward the academy. The weeks that followed transformed Nightshade more thoroughly than the siege. The old ranking system was dismantled. Noble blood no longer guaranteed command positions. Defensive training became mandatory for scholars, while strategy students were given authority equal to combat heirs. The Forbidden Archives were reopened under new protections, and Nova was appointed their youngest official curator. The Academy Council attempted to offer Valen a permanent seat. He refused. He no longer wore the mask of an ordinary professor. His identity as the Midnight Alpha King had become public, and delegations arrived daily demanding explanations, alliances, and assurances. Valen gave them none. He continued training Nova. Their sessions moved from hidden courtyards to the central arena, where students gathered silently to watch. He remained merciless. He knocked her down, disarmed her, and corrected every flaw. Nova became faster, stronger, more precise. Within a month, he stopped defeating her easily. Within 2, she made him bleed. It happened during a dawn session beneath light snowfall. Nova slipped inside his guard, turned beneath his arm, and placed the edge of a silver training blade against his throat. A thin red line appeared beneath it. The watching students gasped. Valen froze. Nova's chest rose and fell. "Half a second," she said. His eyes flashed red. "What?" "You once said half a second was enough to die." Valen looked at the blade, then at her. "It is." Nova smiled. He caught her waist and pulled her against him. The students looked away immediately. Valen's mouth stopped near her ear. "You celebrated again." "I earned it." His grip tightened. "Yes." The quiet pride in his voice warmed her more deeply than praise from the entire academy. He released her before the bond could push them past the boundary they had maintained. Graduation approached. Nova completed every examination with the highest scores ever recorded at Nightshade Academy. She mastered battlefield strategy, ancient ward theory, advanced combat, magical containment, and celestial invocation. The Academy created a new honor because no existing title was sufficient. First Scholar of Nightshade, the strongest student in the Academy's history. On graduation day, the Grand Hall was transformed. The broken black crystal chandeliers had been restored. Silver banners hung from the vaulted ceiling. Representatives from every major territory filled the upper galleries, while students sat beneath them in formal uniforms. The same hall that had once witnessed Nova's rejection now waited to celebrate her. She stood beyond the ceremonial doors, wearing a fitted gown of silver and midnight black. The fabric moved like liquid starlight around her body. Her hair fell in shining waves down her back, no longer hidden or restrained. A pair of ceremonial daggers rested against her hips. She wore no glasses, no oversized sweater, no disguise. When the doors opened, the entire academy rose. Nova entered. Applause struck the hall like thunder. She walked down the central aisle beneath hundreds of watching eyes, but she no longer felt the need to become smaller. Her shoulders remained straight. Her gaze remained forward. At the end of the hall, the faculty sat upon an elevated platform. Valen was not among them. Nova felt the absence immediately. The bond remained strong, but his presence seemed distant, hidden behind some barrier she could not locate. The headmaster waited at the center of the stage. Behind him stood the restored crest of Nightshade Academy, now surrounded by silver stars and black wolves in honor of the siege. Nova climbed the steps. The applause faded. The headmaster lifted a dark silver medal. "Nova Hale," he announced. "You entered this academy as a scholar the elite refused to see. You leave as the warrior who saved every life within these walls." Nova looked across the hall. Students who had once laughed at her now watched with respect. Younger scholars sat in the front rows wearing glasses without shame. Several had chosen combat uniforms instead of ceremonial robes. The headmaster placed the medal around her neck. "You have achieved the highest marks in the Academy's history." You have mastered disciplines once believed impossible to combine. By unanimous decree, Nightshade Academy recognizes you as its first scholar and greatest graduate." The hall erupted. Nova bowed her head. Then the main doors opened. Silence fell instantly. Valen entered. He did not wear the black tactical coat of Professor Valen. He wore the royal attire of the Midnight Alpha King. A long dark mantle fell from his broad shoulders, embroidered with silver constellations and ancient wolf runes. Beneath it, fitted black armor followed the powerful lines of his body. Dark silver clasps crossed his chest, each carved with the symbols of a kingdom erased from official maps but never truly destroyed. A narrow crown rested upon his black hair. It was not decorative. It looked forged for battle. Behind him came the Midnight Pack. Warriors in dark armor filled the aisle, moving with perfect discipline. Elders carried black banners marked with silver moons. Children walked among them, wearing expressions of wonder as they stared at the woman who had restored their lost celestial wards. The academy remained frozen. Valen approached the stage. His abyss-like eyes never left Nova. She felt each step through the bond. The headmaster moved aside. Valen climbed the platform. For a moment, they stood facing one another before the entire academy. Nova's pulse raced. "You missed the ceremony," she said softly. "I arrived for the part that matters." His voice carried through the hall. Valen removed his royal crown and handed it to a Midnight Elder. Then another warrior approached, carrying a long black case. Valen opened it. Inside rested a crown of dark silver. It was breathtaking. Delicate points rose from its band like frozen flames, each one holding a small starstone that glowed from within. Black diamonds formed the shape of a wolf at the center, while ancient silver runes moved slowly along the metal. Nova recognized the language. Equal in shadow, sovereign in light, unbroken in bond. Her breath caught. Valen lifted the crown. Then the terrifying Midnight Alpha King dropped to one knee. The hall gasped. Every Midnight Warrior lowered their head. The faculty stared. The noble representatives rose in shock. Valen looked up at Nova. The cold professor was gone. The ruthless king remained, but all his power was directed toward her with complete devotion. "When I found you in the Forbidden Archives," he said, "you were crying over a male too weak to recognize what stood before him." Nova's throat tightened. "I gave you a dagger because comfort would have insulted the strength you had not yet discovered." His eyes burned red. "I believed I was teaching you to survive." He drew a slow breath. "But you taught me that survival is not enough." The bond opened between them. Nova felt everything he had restrained. The hunger, the fear, the fierce pride. The nights he had stood outside the medical bay after leaving her alone. The rage he had swallowed each time she was injured. The unbearable terror that had filled him when she fell from the tower. Valen's voice lowered. "I spent years in exile believing my kingdom was only stone, territory, and wolves, waiting for a defeated king to return." He held the crown before her. "Then you awakened the stars above it." Nova's eyes burned with tears. Valen continued. "You do not need my name to become powerful. You do not need my throne to become worthy. You do not need my protection to stand." His gaze became absolute. "But I need you." The words moved through the hall like a vow. "I need your mind beside mine, your light within my darkness, your courage facing every enemy that comes for us." He raised the crown. "Nova Hale, first scholar of Nightshade, bearer of starlight magic, my true fated mate." His voice roughened. "Do not merely graduate from this academy." The Midnight Warriors lifted their heads. "Come home with me." Nova stopped breathing. "Come to the kingdom that has waited for its stars to return. Stand beside me as my equal. Rule with me as my mate." Valen's red eyes held hers. "And allow me to spend the rest of my life proving that no crown I possess will ever stand above yours." The entire academy waited. Nova looked down at the man who had never asked her to become smaller. He had found her broken and offered no false promises. He had placed a weapon at her feet and demanded that she stand. He had protected her without making her helpless. He had taught her to use her own power, then bowed before it. Nova reached for the crown. Valen allowed her fingers to touch the dark silver. "Will I have authority over the archives?" she asked. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the hall. Valen's mouth curved. "You will have authority over everything." "Equal command of the armies?" "Yes." "Independent control of celestial wards?" "Yes." "The right to disagree with you in council? You already exercise that right everywhere else." Nova smiled through her tears. "One more condition." "Name it." "No more pretending you are only my professor." Valen's eyes became pure red. "Agreed." Nova lowered her head. "Then crown me." Valen rose slowly. He placed the dark silver crown upon her hair. The moment it touched her, starlight erupted through the hall. Silver energy climbed the pillars. The restored chandeliers blazed like constellations. Every black banner of the Midnight Pack illuminated beneath a field of stars. The royal bond sealed. Nova felt Valen's darkness wrap around her light, not consuming it, but strengthening its brilliance. His power opened to her completely. His kingdom, his wolf, his heart. She opened herself in return. Valen stared at her as though the world had ceased to exist. "My queen," he whispered. Nova caught the front of his royal armor. She pulled him toward her. Their mouths met. The kiss was not cautious. It carried every moment of restraint they had endured. Every touch denied in the training rooms. Every breath held in the medical bay. Every promise hidden beneath orders and corrections. Valen's arms closed around her. He lifted her against his chest as the bond exploded through them. Nova wrapped her arms around his neck, deepening the kiss while silver light and midnight darkness spiraled above the stage. The academy erupted. Midnight warriors struck their fists against their armor. Students cheered. Professors bowed. The headmaster wiped tears from his eyes while pretending to adjust his ceremonial collar. Valen kissed Nova as a mate, not a professor. As a man who had found the only person powerful enough to stand beside his throne. When they finally separated, his forehead rested against hers. "You are trembling," he murmured. "So are you." "I am an Alpha King." "You are still trembling," he smiled. It transformed his severe face. Nova touched his cheek. "Take me home." Months later, the Midnight Kingdom rose from beneath the mountains. The exiled pack had not vanished. It had waited in hidden valleys, underground cities, and fortress caves protected by ancient darkness. When Nova arrived, the silver wards awakened one by one. Stars appeared in caverns that had never seen the sky. The Midnight Throne Room stood beneath an enormous crystal dome. Valen's seat had once occupied the highest platform alone. Nova ordered a second throne built beside it. Equal height, equal power. Then she converted the abandoned Western Wing into the largest magical archive in the territories. Valen complained that books were consuming his war room. Nova informed him that poor planning was not her fault. He responded by carrying her across the council table and reminding her that queens could be removed from meetings for distracting the king. She reminded him that queens commanded the guards. The guards sided with her. The kingdom prospered. Nightshade Academy became the first institution to accept students based on ability rather than bloodline. Scholars trained in combat. Warriors studied strategy. The Forbidden Archives became a center of learning instead of fear. Nova returned each year to teach one course. She always began the same way. She placed a heavy, unsharpened dagger at the feet of the most frightened student in the room. Not because cruelty created strength, because someone had once looked beyond her tears and recognized a weapon waiting to be lifted. Years later, Nova stood on the highest tower of the Midnight Palace, beneath a sky crowded with silver stars. Her crown rested upon her hair. Valen stood behind her, his arms around her waist, his chin near her shoulder. Below them stretched a kingdom of black stone, glowing windows, and restored celestial wards. "You were right," Nova said. Valen's breath warmed her neck. "About what?" I was at war before I noticed." His grip tightened. "And now?" Nova looked over the empire they had built together. "Now I know how to win." Valen kissed the mark of their bond beneath her ear. Nova had once believed strength belonged to those born beneath bright banners, wealthy names, and inherited crowns. She had believed power was something granted by approval, bloodline, or the love of someone important. She had been wrong. True strength was not born in the light of privilege. It was forged in the darkest shadows, in the moment a broken person chose to rise, and by the one who did not ask to wield her power for her, but taught her how to hold the weapon herself. Valen had given Nova a dagger. Nova had forged an empire. And the Midnight King stood beside his Starlight Queen, guarding nothing above her, claiming nothing within her, and loving every dangerous, radiant thing she had chosen to become. If you enjoyed this steamy, romantic, and thrilling paranormal romance audiobook, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic stories.